everyone, welcome back to the podcast. It has been a few weeks since I last recorded, but life has definitely been moving and my thoughts have surely been brewing. Like probably mostly everyone listening, I have been watching all the things going on in the United States lately, especially the tension around immigration enforcement, all these ICE operations and protests, the political arguments that are nonstop, and mostly just the way everyday people seem more on edge with each other than ever. And so I just want to start off by saying I am not coming at this from a political side. That is the least bit of my intention with this episode and just this podcast in general. I'm not here to tell anyone what to believe. That is also not my aim. I'm more interested in what this moment means historically, emotionally, and even more so spiritually. And that is going to be more of the focus on this episode because underneath the policies and the headlines, there are human beings. And underneath all this political conflict, there's something deeper happening in the human spirit. And I want to shift the perspective to that. Right now, as we are all aware of, regardless of whatever political party you claim, immigration enforcement has become one of the most emotionally charged issues in the country. ICE operations, border policies, deportations, sanctuary cities, these aren't just news topics. They are what are affecting families, communities, and the way people feel about their safety, their sense of identity and belonging. And when enforcement actions increase or become more visible, fear increases too, just naturally. This means fear in immigrant communities, fear among people who feel the system is out of control, even fear among people who feel laws aren't being enforced fairly, just fear on all sides. And when fear rises in a society, people don't tend to move towards each other, they tend to pull apart. That's where we are right now. A country where a lot of people feel unheard and unprotected or just straight up misunderstood. And that emotional pressure starts spilling into everyday interactions, whether we consciously realize that or not. When people hear ICE, it can mean very different things depending on who you are. For some, it's just another government acronym. For others, it is that fear and uncertainty, the sound of a knock that no one wants to hear. And for anything else, I want to say this isn't about attacking individuals. There are human beings inside every system. But my point is that systems themselves, they carry energy, they carry intention, they carry impact. And yeah, that's just really the point I'm trying to make. The impact of immigration enforcement in this country has left a lot of families living in quiet anxiety. Parents scared to drive too far from their home, kids growing up too fast because they know what papers means, people contributing to communities, working hard, loving so deeply, but also while living with the constant feeling that the ground beneath them isn't stable. And that does something to the spirit, not just individually, but collectively. Because when any group of people lives in fear, the fear doesn't stay contained. It becomes part of the emotional climate of the place. And again, I think even places hold energy. Homes do. Cities do, countries do. And lately, the energy of this nation feels straight up tense. It feels divided and uncertain, like we're all holding our breath. Policies around immigration are just one piece of that, but they are a powerful one. And they tend to bring up questions like who belongs here, who gets safety, who gets to stay with their family, whose life is considered legal enough to matter. Those questions cut so much deeper than politics itself. They go into mortality, into empathy, into the soul of a country. And when decisions are made that separates families, detain people in harsh conditions, or just treat human beings like problems to be managed instead of lives to be honored, that leaves a spiritual imprint. You can feel it. Even if you're not directly affected, you can feel when something is off. And I feel like we all sense that something's off. One thing that has helped me zoom out, though, is just remembering that immigration tension isn't new in U.S. history. there have been other periods where fear and enforcement collided in painful ways. For example, like in the late 1800s, you might have remembered in history when we learned that there were strong anti immigrant movements targeting Chinese communities, leading to exclusion laws and violence. In the 1930s and 40s, I think it was the Mexican and Mexican American families that were deported during mass reparation efforts, many of them US citizens. During World War II, it was the Japanese. After 9/11, it was the Middle Eastern communities. Every one of those different periods, and I'm sure there was many more that I didn't mention, were fueled by the belief that the country needed protection. But history also shows that when fear drives policy without enough humanity alongside it, harm happens. Looking back, we often seem to say or wonder, like, how did we let that happen? But the truth is, those people didn't think they were living in history. They thought they were just responding to the moment, just like we are now. So, yeah, this is nothing new. And I just believe it's helpful in giving a clear perspective when we acknowledge that. Like, the fact that this is a nation built through colonization, through displacement, through forced labor, and through borders drawn by power, not by the natural flow of people and culture. No, that doesn't mean that there's no beauty here. There is so much of it. There's community and creativity, diversity, resilience, all that. That's real too. But it does mean the foundation was cracked from the start. And when a house is built on a shaky foundation, you can renovate the walls all you want. Eventually, the deeper issues demand attention. And I don't say this with hate. I don't say this wishing for destruction. But I do feel deeply that we are living in a time where the cracks are way too visible to ignore. It's like systems that once felt permanent are starting to feel fragile, and our trust in institutions are it's thinning at such a rapid pace, and people are questioning narratives that they once accepted without even thinking about it. It can all feel so scary, like everything is unraveling. But spiritually, unraveling isn't always the end. Sometimes I think it's just the beginning of truth being revealed. So I was thinking, why does it feel so personal today, though? Like, why do we feel this so deeply, all of us? I think it's just part of this era and the intensity of how connected we are. Like everything's just in your face. We don't just hear about events. We see the videos, personal stories, emotional reactions, political arguments all at once. Social media amplifies the loudest voices, the scariest clips, and the most extreme opinions. And then we get stuck in this echo chamber. So it can feel like the country is tearing itself apart. But what's really happening is that we're witnessing in real time a struggle over identity. Again, those questions like who belongs, who is protected, who's heard, who has power, all those things. And those are too bigger than immigration policy. And I think they touch something very deep in the human psyche. And it's that need for dignity and recognition. And when conversations start living at that deep of a level, everything begins to feel heavier and more personal and emotional. But even in moments when tension feels loudest, the beautiful thing is that humanity has a way of reminding us who we are underneath all of it. There are moments that remind you of something bigger. Like, for example, a few weeks ago, Bad Bunny's halftime performance at the Super Bowl. As a Boricua, watching that performance, it hit differently. Not just because of the music, but because of the message mainly. That love over hate, unity over division. All of that said felt so necessary right now because having Puerto Rican blood itself means carrying a history shaped by migration, resilience, survival, a people who have always existed between worlds, yet never without culture, never without heart. The heart of Puerto Rican culture shone through that night. through the creativity and rhythm, community, all of that. It made me feel proud of our people, proud of the culture, proud that even in a country that feels so divided right now, our different stories, our hearts, even our music, they still matter. They remind us that love is more powerful than fear, that joy, even in those small moments, is revolutionary, and that feeling connects directly to what I've been talking about today, which is why I mentioned it, because while systems argue about borders and identity, culture reminds us of something simpler, that humanity has always been shared through storytelling and through our connections that we can make through music. Again, we are in a moment of tension and of breakdown and uncertainty, but that doesn't mean that all is lost. The same way music and culture rise above fear, so can empathy, awareness, and our ability to actually see one another fully again. For a moment, yeah, those performances, those moments, they make you feel connected again, like we are part of something shared. But outside of those moments, I can't ignore how easily we slip into the opposite, because what really concerns me most in moments like this isn't disagreement. Disagreement is part of democracy. That's never going to change. It's more when we stop seeing each other as people, when immigrants are labeled as illegals instead of mothers, fathers, children, when law enforcement become monsters instead of individuals with their own families and just simply complicated roles, when political opponents become enemies instead of fellow citizens. This is when division turns into dehumanization. And history shows us that once people stop seeing each other as human, harm becomes easier to justify. That's not a left or right issue. That's a human one. Not just with immigration, not just with one policy or one agency, but with the entire way we've structured power, borders, identity, and belonging. But maybe what feels like chaos is actually exposure. Maybe it's both. But exposure of what was never just, what was never ever supposed to be sustainable, what was never ever aligned with the idea that all human beings carry equal worth. That doesn't mean I want things to crumble. Pain is real. Instability hurts real people. Families suffer in the in between, and that matters. And this is where I've been reflecting on the spiritual side of what's happening, because yeah, when societies go through these periods of anger and division, fear, it's not just a political crisis. Again, it's a spiritual one. And it's that fear is that's shrinking us. It makes us protective and reactive, suspicious even. It makes us see threats before we see people. And from a spiritual perspective, moments like this are starting to reveal that we are a bit disconnected from one another, just from the compassion that we're lacking, from the understanding that every person carries an inner world just as real as our own. It's like a collective mirror, and it's showing us our wounds, our unresolved history, all of this collective unhealed trauma, not just individually again, but culturally. Culturally. I didn't say that right. You know what I mean? And just like personal healing, collective healing often starts with discomfort and just exposing again with that exposure and realizing that something here isn't aligned with who we want to be. Maybe we are in that breakdown phase that often comes before the breakthrough. I mean, we can only hope. I mean, in nature, things fall apart all the time. There's forests that burn and seasons die, old growth collapses, but from that destruction, new ecosystems are born, and there becomes richer soil and new life and just a stronger balance in all. So yeah, I tend to wonder if we're in a similar moment collectively, a moment where we can, or we can't, I guess, avoid asking what kind of future we actually want to build. And I also think about how maybe, I don't know, maybe we're just being invited, maybe forced to reimagine what kind of world we want to build next. A one that is hopefully rooted in less fear and more dignity, less in punishment and more in understanding, and probably just more in a way that's less in us versus them and more in we. Because we're in this together. This world, like, I just don't understand. I don't understand. I, I, I feel like if we think of a country like a living thing, one that's still young and still evolving, then conflict can be looked at as a part of the growth. Growth isn't always peaceful, like we know, for ourselves individually. It often involves friction between old ways and the newfound awareness. Spiritually, this moment could be asking us, can we hold boundaries without losing compassion and enforce laws without losing our humanity? Those are not just policy questions, they are moral and spiritual ones. And they won't be solved overnight, but they start at the level of consciousness, how we think, how we speak, how we treat each other. Right now, it is okay to grieve what we're seeing, the harshness, the division, and just that humanity sometimes takes a backseat to policy, unfortunately. But it's also okay to hold hope that awareness is growing, that the younger generations are asking deeper questions, and that maybe compassion is getting louder, even if cruelty at the moment still is making more noise. Maybe this era will be remembered as the time when everything that was hidden came to the surface, when we could no longer pretend that the system was fair just because it was familiar. And maybe, hopefully, from the discomfort, we'll build something more humane. Something that remembers that borders are political, but love, family, culture, and the desire for safety are human. And just like that halftime performance, it's a reminder that the heart still has power, that beauty and joy and even pride can rise when fear is loudest. And when I sit with all that, just the history, the tension, the spiritual lessons, and hope, it inevitably brings me to one question. If this really is a moment of awakening or transformation, then what is our role inside of it? I mean, we might not be policymakers or lawyers, maybe you are, but if you're not, we're just witnessing it all. We're witnesses to our own time. Just regular people living through history just by being present and living their everyday lives. But spiritually and socially, that doesn't make us powerless. Maybe our role might be just to stay informed without drowning in all this outrage and refuse to dehumanize people we disagree with, and to teach our kids empathy and critical thinking and emotional awareness. Big systems change slowly, but culture changes through everyday interaction. So maybe try stepping back when the noise gets too overwhelming and do your best to return to groundedness, because the tone of a nation isn't only shaped in government buildings. It's shaped in our own homes and the schools and workplaces and our communities. I keep returning to also this idea that all this darkness doesn't mean that light is gone. Sometimes it's a call to wake up to the light that we already carry, to see what we can nurture even when the world feels uncertain. Like what can we actually hold on to? And the answer, I think, is hope. Back to hope. That the kind that isn't passive, but it's active. It's conscious, and it's grounded in how we are choosing to live and interact in our everyday lives. And I think I've mentioned it before because hope can seem like such a naive thing to some, but it doesn't mean pretending everything is fine. It means just believing that tension can lead to transformation if we stay conscious. History shows that all those painful periods have often led to deeper awareness and new projections and cultural growth, even if the process was messy and slow. Spiritually, darkness seems to be trying to overthrow the light, but it's not there. Again, I'd like to think that if we open our eyes to the light that we carry inside and actually choose to make the changes in our lives positively positively excuse me, and we we shine light on others through this dark time, and in ways that are like being more intentional with our words or just more compassionate in general, we can overcome all this crazy wickedness in the world. Those are just some of my thoughts for everything happening. I hope that this episode gave a little clarity or peace. If it happens that this topic touches you personally, I totally see you. If you're confused or questioning, just trying to make sense of the world right now, you're definitely not alone. It's okay to fear. It's okay to care, excuse me, and feel conflicted. I think that it helps to know that we're all walking through a moment of massive transition, but not alone. And like any journey, it's emotional. It can be very messy and uncertain, but we're doing it together. And this journey, it also leads somewhere. So hold on to hope, and hopefully we'll arrive somewhere much better than we are right now. Thank you guys for sitting with me in this conversation. Thank you for being willing to feel deeply and think deeply. That's really where the change begins. Just rooted in awareness. So wherever you are on your path right now, just keep going. And I'll catch you guys on the next one.